T13, take one.
Drunk profile? Yeah. Talk to him, Marty, from here.
Listen, Teddy, we don't do us all a favor. You tell us.
Don't turn the body to him.
Excuse me.
Yes, now talk to him in profile.
Pardon me, Marty?
Yeah, would you explain the name Tippy? Where does it originate from?
It's a Swedish nickname.
For what?
For Tupsa.
For what?
Tupsa.
Would you say that again, please?
Tupsa.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
That's an anatomical term. Meaning?
Tupsa.
Little girl.
Oh, really?
Yes. In Swedish.
Let's look again up there.
November 1961. Alfred Hitchcock directs a screen test.
Look at those people there out there. Who the hell they think they are?
The woman is Tippi Hedren. A former model, she has never acted before. Hitchcock plans to make her the star of his next film, The Birds. For Hollywood's most successful director, fresh from the triumph of Psycho, nothing seems impossible.
So many people were saying, how can you do this, Hitch? Put somebody totally unknown, has never acted before. How can you put this woman into, this film that you're going to do? It's going to be a major motion picture. And Hitch gave me the assurance that I could do it.
He confided that he felt he was at the top of his form, that he was entering his golden age of filmmaking. Everything was still ahead of him. And he was brimming all the time with ideas. We ought to do a film about that or this or... And indeed, I felt he was at the top of his form.
But Hitchcock's golden age would be a bumpy ride for the director and those closest to him. The successes of the past would prove elusive, and the man who valued order above all else would court chaos in his emotional life.
T14, take one.
Marty, I'm sending over to you a high priestess. But of what, you'll have to decide for yourself.
Hitchcock liked to say his definition of happiness was a clear horizon. But even as he screen tested his new star, the storm clouds were gathering. In the early 1950s, Alfred Hitchcock was looking for a home. Brought to Hollywood in 1939 by David Selznick, he had endured 7 years of interference and financial exploitation before finally slipping the leash and forming his own company, Transatlantic Pictures. But Transatlantic collapsed, and with it the director's hard-won reputation for box office bankability. At Warner Brothers, he went some way to burying the memory of the failure of Rope and Under Capricorn, with hits like Strangers on a Train. What he needed now was a secure base from which to prove once and for all that he was a force to be reckoned with. Paramount Studios was to be that home.
The Paramount people felt that this was a logical home for Hitchcock. They gave him every single opportunity and every single convenience he needed. There was never an argument. Hitchcock would come in and say, I want to do this picture, and they would say, yes. When? They'd never say why, but when?
This is the apartment of a man named Jeffries, a news photographer whose beat used to be the world. Right now, his world has shrunk down to the size of this window.
Hitchcock's sense of security at Paramount is apparent in the choice of his first film, Rear Window. Told almost entirely from the point of view of a wheelchair-bound Jimmy Stewart, and shot on an elaborate set, Rear Window managed to be both experimental and crowd-pleasing.
This is the traveling salesman and his invalid wife. Out of their arguments and nagging comes a weird kind of love. Miss Torso, the body beautiful. That is, viewed from a safe distance.
It was a very quiet set, very well organized set, and I remember lots of people visiting the set. Sometimes Mr. Hitchcock would close it, but he was very proud of it. That imagine my little apartment had everything but running water and ice cubes. I had my bed, and I had food there, and it was complete. This whole little village, if you will. Sort of like Mr. Hitchcock's dollhouse, playing with his little dolls and placing them where he wanted them.
The most beautiful doll in the doll's house was Grace Kelly.
How's your leg?
Every man who ever was lucky enough to work with Grace Kelly fell in love with her, me included. I'm sure even Hitch felt, nobody could be in her presence and not fall in love with her. She's a lovely person.
Anything else bothering you?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Reading from top to bottom. Lisa. Carol. Fremont.
Rear Window, her second role for the director, confirmed Kelly as the ultimate Hitchcock blonde.
Have you any idea at all why you have this obsession with this kind of woman?
I'm only obsessed because I don't believe in stamping the woman with the word sex all over her. I think it should be discovered in the course of our getting acquainted with her. And it's more interesting for this thing to be not apparent. In other words, we don't have to have the sex hanging round her neck like baubles all over her.
Give up, John. Admit who you are. Even in this light, I can tell where your eyes are looking.
If you take the English woman, or the North German, or the Swedish woman, sometimes they can even look like schoolmarms. But boy, when they get going, they're quite astonishing in their, shall we say, perspicacity of their sex. I believe it's something to do with the climate. I believe the further south you go in Europe, the more obvious the sex is.
Ever had a better offer in your whole life? One with everything.
He had this very secret, repressed interest in females. He carried around inside of him a lot of guilt feelings based on not what he had done, but what he would like to have done.
I'll soon fix that. There, miss. Now you're a special constable.
What's the idea? What you doing?
As long as you stay, he stays. Yes, and as long as I go, you go. Come on. Stop them. They've got away.
The Hitchcock blonde has a long history, which goes as far back as Madeleine Carroll in the 39 Steps. Glamorous and glacial, Hitchcock's dream woman is usually brought down to earth with a bump.
He always used to take women who were very, very much in control of their lives and put them in a situation of just great upheaval and see how they come out. Do they survive? How do they survive? Interesting.
They're coming! They're coming!
It's always been assumed that Hitch was some kind of misogynist, but I have the impression from a number of things that he told me later on that if you're thinking of his films, that he wasn't identifying so much with the glamour male figures, the Cary Grants, the James Stewarts and so on, but if he was identifying with anybody, it was with the suffering heroine. In fact, he always, as far as I can make out, enjoyed the company of women, perhaps more than he enjoyed the company of men. He certainly always had female assistants, female secretaries. Alma, his wife, of course, was his most important assistant and collaborator throughout his career.
I knew that he relied on Alma. It was partly reliance and partly fear. She was the fulcrum around which his life was led, no matter what his fantasies were, and I'm sure he had many fantasies. It was Alma that was the one that was really ruling the roost.
I think she really did love him, and God knows she did appreciate him, and she protected him, or tried to. A kind of a maternal thing with him. But it was a good marriage.
By now, the Hitchcocks were firmly established in their adopted home. In Hollywood, they lived in a modest bungalow in Bel Air, but their favorite place was San Francisco. The city and the surrounding area would provide an unforgettable setting for one of Hitchcock's most haunting films, Vertigo.
Hitchcock recognized what he called a good yarn when he saw it. And the thing that attracted him, of course, was the idea of a man losing a woman to death and then resurrecting her. That's all he needed to think, oh, I can do that. I can do that.
Vertigo remains one of Hitchcock's most enigmatic and, according to some, revealing films. The story of a man who tries to make over a woman in the image of one who is dead is said to echo Hitchcock's own efforts to recreate his ideal actress.
He did try to make over women into the actresses he liked to work with. He would have liked to have worked all his life with Ingrid Bergman, Grace Kelly, you see. And all actresses that he used were in his mind like that.
I just want an ordinary, simple gray suit.
But I like that one, Scotty.
No, it's not right.
The gentleman seems to know what he wants. All right, we'll find it.
You're looking for the suit that she wore for me. You want me to be dressed like her.
Judy, I just want you to look nice. I know the kind of a suit that'll look well on you.
No, I won't do it.
Judy. Judy, it can't make that much difference to you. I just want to see what you
No, I don't want any clothes. I don't want anything. I want to get out of here.
Judy, do this for me.
There was a kinship with the man in the story of wanting to make somebody over. So he recognized that, of course, but it wasn't anything he pressed. Not really.
With Vertigo, Hitchcock had made a real attempt to move beyond the traditional suspense formula, but few critics appreciated the effort. One called the film far-fetched nonsense and claimed it made him feel carsick. Others were less kind.
Hitch treated critics as a necessary evil. He entertained as many critics as you could find, but he had no great respect for them. He didn't think they really knew what they were talking about most of the time. They would see things in his pictures that he never intended, and they would miss the points that he did intend.
I think they're very nice. I think they're very human. They're subject to all kinds of human foibles, is that the word? And I think they mean very well. I'm not going to stress the word mean. I said they mean very well. And they have their job to do, and I have my job to do.
Mr. Hitchcock, wenn Sie jetzt sofort einen Kriminalfilm in der Schweiz machen müssten.
When he was dealing with critics, he was dealing with the enemy, because they were analyzing what he was doing. They weren't surrendering to it. And consequently, in his interviews, he kept on giving you what you expected. He wasn't going to allow anyone to slip under his guard. His interviews, like the trailers that he made for the films, were there to conceal things rather than to expose things. An interview for Hitchcock was like a living autopsy. There he was, spread out, still alive, and you were cutting him open.
But even as Vertigo received a mauling at the pens of the American and British critics, elsewhere a powerful counter-movement was underway. The master of suspense was about to become the master auteur.
La fine équipe des cahiers, entre François, Godard aussi, Romer en tout cas, et moi finalement, on s'est retrouvé beaucoup, cette espèce d'amitié qui est née beaucoup grâce à Hitchcock, parce qu'on était 4 ou 5 comme ça, à nous être aperçus qu'il y avait une espèce de profondeur presque vertigineuse dans les films d'Hitchcock.
The French relished the way in which you could take a Hitchcock scene apart in fine detail. You could dissect it, and every cut, every angle, every positioning was clearly chosen. It was pointed, and it did something. And in that way, Hitchcock demonstrated what directing was, that someone made the film, and it was the director. And the French loved that idea, partly because they wanted to be film directors. And I think the English attitude was, well, he's just a terrific professional. Bit of a tease, rather droll, but come on, let's keep our feet on the ground.
Hitchcock n'avait jamais été vraiment reconnu. Au mieux, il avait fait des divertissements délicieux, quoi. Bon, ça, c'était... Je vous jure, c'était insupportable. Hein. On ne pouvait pas... Parce que ça impliquait que les gens qui parlaient de cinéma ne voyaient pas les films, n'avaient pas compris ce qu'était le cinéma.
We are now on the air.
Nous sommes maintenant sur l'air.
The canonization of Hitchcock by the French New Wave culminated in one of the more extraordinary encounters in the history of the cinema, when critic and director François Truffaut embarked on an interview with his hero that lasted for over 50 hours. Part interrogation, part act of homage, Truffaut, with collaborator Helen Scott acting as interpreter, led Hitchcock step by step through his life and career.
Of the period of their childhood, they always tell the story of the
Quand son père l'avait fait
police
enfermer.
station when your father had you locked up.
Et qu'est-ce que M. Hitchcock avait fait pour mériter ça?
And what had you done to deserve that?
I cannot imagine, because my father
Je ne peux pas
used
m'imaginer parce que mon père.
because my father used to call me the little lamb without a spot.
Disarmed by Truffaut's affectionate respect, the director put aside the Hitch persona and went further than he had ever done before in revealing the real Alfred Hitchcock.
Why is it that the love scenes
Pourquoi
that I
est-ce
put
que
in
les scènes d'amour que je mets dans mes
usually so strong?
sont tellement fortes?
I don't get any particular
Pour moi-
kick out of doing that sort
Pour
of
moi,
scene
personnellement, ça ne me
myself.
donne aucune sensation
As
particulière de
we've,
faire une
as we've
scène.
discussed before, I'm a celibate, you know.
Parce que comme nous l'avons dit avant, je suis moi un célibat.
I mean, I'm not against it,
Je ne suis pas contre.
but I just don't
Mais ça nous amène à
think
une
about
question
it
que vous
very
avez posée.
much, you know.
Mais je n'y pense pas beaucoup, dit-il.
Ah, vos films en sont pleins.
Yes, but your pictures are full of it.
Well, I would say then maybe that's the outlet, huh?
Alors je dis c'est peut-être les coulées, c'est ça que je veux dire.
Peut-être, comme oui, comme les crimes d'ailleurs.
As the crimes, as a matter of fact.
Maybe.
In one exchange, Hitchcock described an idea for a film about 24 hours in the life of a city, told entirely from the perspective of food.
I would like to do of 24 hours in the city. I can see the whole film from
Je peux
beginning
voir
to end
tout le film
now.
du début jusqu'à la fin maintenant.
I tried to do it on a food analogy. I tried to show the arrival of food in the
L'arrivée.
city, the distribution of
La
it, the
distribution.
buying of it, the cooking, the eating.
La différente forme.
And then gradually, the
graduellement,
end of the film would be
à la
the
fin du
sewer.
qui
They
sortent
tip
avec
it in the
les
ocean,
ordures,
you know.
qui est retombé dans l'océan.
The early brand new gleaming green vegetables
Les,
and the
les,
mess of them that go out
les
at the end of
légumes
the
verts
day.
étincelantes, encore
It's-
ruisselant de
it's-
fraîcheur.
It's what people do to
Thématiquement dans
good
une chose.
things.
De cette façon, c'est sur
You
les
could
gens
make your theme
fait aux choses
almost
qui sont
the
belles.
rottenness of humanity.
Alors, votre thème devient la saleté de l'humanité.
you know.
The Truffaut interview confirmed Hitchcock as a leading auteur director. But to his increasing annoyance, he would never escape his other reputation as master showman.
You really are, and I mean this as a compliment, you really are a sort of ace manipulator, it seems to me, because you know so much about the tricks of the trade.
Don't you think technique would be a nicer word? If I were a painter, would you call strokes with the brush tricks?
Ironically, the one thing that above all others stopped him from being taken seriously as an artist was the very thing that contributed most to his fame.
Oh, good evening. I was just about to send greetings to an old friend.
For 10 years, starting in 1955, Hitchcock's TV shows were among the most popular on American screens. Produced by his protege, Joan Harrison, they were relished for their clever twists and high production values, but most of all for Hitchcock's introductions, written for him by Jimmy Allardyce.
He would do anything that Jimmy asked him to do for the lead-ins. Thus, you had Hitch inside a bottle. Then you had Hitch in golfing knickers, playing golf in a most outlandish outfit. You had Hitch playing his own brother. You had Hitch with a lion. You had him doing, well, I must say, these lead-ins would come in, and I'd say to Joan Harrison, we can't show this to him. He'll never do this. I mean, never. We better send this back. She said, Hitch will do it. And he did.
He created that buffoonish character. It was the one thing I blamed him for, but I understood why he did it. He wanted to be famous and rich, and he got all those things. But by creating that buffoonish character, he threw off the cinema world.
Well, this looks interesting.
they sort of resented the fact that he had created that character that made him worldwide famous, and therefore they said his pictures can't be that good, and therefore they never gave him an Academy Award.
The man who made Hitchcock into a television star was his agent, Lew Wasserman, head of the MCA talent agency. Wasserman embodied all the power of the so-called front office, the business end of filmmaking. He wielded the kind of authority that Hitchcock both respected and resented.
He and Hitch had a love-hate relationship, but Mr. Wasserman exercised a kind of control over Hitch's career that I think kind of drove him crazy from time to time.
He clearly would do anything for Wasserman, and seemingly Wasserman would do everything for him, but he would put him down in lunch. Oh, well, you know, doing it for him, doing it for Wasserman or whatever. Not, you know, he wasn't vicious or anything, but you could see he liked to insult the front office and make fun of them a little bit.
Under Wasserman's leadership, MCA had become one of the most powerful talent agencies Hollywood had ever seen. In 1958, it bought Universal Studios, where the Hitchcock television show was made. Wasserman's next move was to get Hitchcock away from Paramount and bring him to Universal to make his feature films. The Lever would be a dark story about a woman on the run, a strange young man, his domineering mother, and a run-down motel.
Psycho is my first attempt at a shocker. In other words, it has in its content certain episodes which do shock. In some sense it could be called a horror film, but the horror only comes to you after you've seen it, when you get home in the dark.
This was the last picture on his commitment to Paramount. And I know that they were hoping for another North by Northwest or this grand extravaganza, color, everything, and to do a black and white film noir little picture. I mean, they were, you know, just threw up their hands, and they were horrified.
I couldn't believe it. I said, Hitch, why did you give this to me to read? I said, this belongs in your TV unit, not in your feature films. The brutal killing, the peeping Tom business, it was a cheap kind of a picture, not my kind of a picture, not Hitchcock's kind of a picture, I didn't think. I said, I don't want any part of this picture.
Paramount all but disowned Psycho. They were happy for it to be made on the Universal backlot, and even more pleased when Hitchcock offered to finance the film himself. For Hitchcock, however, Psycho was the biggest gamble of his life. Everyone who worked on the film was aware that budget concerns were uppermost in his mind.
I wanted, for my own sake, to do a big Technicolor wonderful movie. And the first thing that Hitch said to me was, there's a company, American International, that's making pictures for about $250,000. And he said, what if we did that? And I think what he meant by that was, what if somebody of his caliber directed one of these low-budget movies? And he told me that he had intended to do Psycho for under $1 million, that he was going to use his TV team, all those people who had worked so beautifully on his series were now going to work on this movie. And it was all kind of disappointing to me at first.
But Psycho was about more than money. The television series had won Hitchcock a younger audience. Psycho was to be their film. Screenwriter Joe Stefano, a high school dropout who was in Freudian analysis at the time, provided a vital link to the drive-in generation.
When I described the opening scene and said that they are meeting in a hotel room on her lunch, that they're shacking up, I got the feeling that that kind of lit him a little bit. I think that he liked the fact that I was bringing a young man's approach to this.
You never did eat your lunch, did you?
I better get back to the office. These extended lunch hours give my boss excess acid.
Why don't you call your boss and tell him you're taking the rest of the afternoon off?
C'est votre première scène en soutien-gorge dans
I think it's your first scene in
l'histoire de vos 50
Brazil
films.
in the history of your 50 films.
I felt the need to do a scene of that kind.
Je ressentais le besoin de faire une scène de cette sorte parce que
the audiences are changing.
Les publics changent.
You know, and I think you have to give them
Et je crois qu'il
today
faut leur donner aujourd'hui
the way they behave themselves most of the
la
time.
façon dont ils se conduisent eux-mêmes la plupart du temps.
This was a movie about sex. It had always been a movie about sex as far as I was concerned. And boys and their mothers don't have any problems that aren't sexual. And I told Hitch that this was how I felt. I even told him one time that I had had a session in which I realized down deep inside that I could have murdered my mother when I was 14 years old. And he was quite astounded by that and also quite pleased to hear it.
Mother, she's just a stranger. As if men don't desire strangers. As if, oh, I refuse to speak of disgusting things because they disgust me. You understand, boy? Go on, go tell her she'll not be appeasing her ugly appetite with my food, or my son. Or do I have to tell her because you don't have the guts? Huh, boy? You have the guts, boy?
Shut up! Shut up!
He set this picture up so well because one closed set, you know, and rumors kept going out, nudity, you know, murder, blood, all this stuff that he instigated and sent it out there so that everybody could, you know, get the hype going. The shower scene took 7 days to shoot and over 70 setups because even though it was on the screen for 2 seconds, say the shot from up above was on the screen for 2 seconds, it still took 2 hours to set up, but because it was a very important part of the whole montage. So it was very hard. I had no idea of the impact of the shower scene when I was doing it. I knew each scene had an impact, especially the last one, but the total effect I didn't get until I actually saw it, because then I saw what he had envisioned all along, which was each cut of the film, each editing cut, was the slice of the knife.
I went into Hitch's office the day after it opened, and as I walked in, he went, and I laughed and sat down, and then he got a call that it was raining in Chicago, where the movie was playing, and that people were standing all around the block in the rain. He said, "Get them umbrellas."
This is Alfred Hitchcock. Having lived with Psycho since it was a gleam in my camera's eye, I now exercise my parental rights in revealing a number of significant facts about this slightly extraordinary entertainment. I've suggested that Psycho be seen from the beginning. In fact, this is more than a suggestion. It is required.
He refused to have a press show, and he made us queue up with the public, which he loved. You know, get the critics down on the level of the people that actually pay the money. And when we came out, Hitchcock was waiting in the lobby with his hands in front of his punch, looking with delight at the aghast faces of the critics. And I said to him, I honestly don't think this is going to get good notices. He said, "You don't think it'll play very well, Mr. Walker?" He said, "Perhaps not with your tribe, but I think looking at them, looking at the public, it'll play very well indeed." And it did. Cost $800,000, it made $11 million. It was his first big jackpot.
After Psycho, Hitchcock moved to Universal Studios permanently. From the top floor of the so-called Black Tower, Wasserman made sure his director wanted for nothing.
He had his private office, he had a back area where he ate his lunches, and then a hallway where production could be. The unit manager, the assistant director, the art department, the editing department, and he had a projection room. And it was the only one of its kind on Universal's lot. And it was just marvelous to work under those conditions.
The scale of Psycho's success, which took everyone by surprise, brought with it problems of its own.
Hitchcock used to complain that, he was in competition with himself, and that, people complained if it wasn't the kind of Hitchcock movie that they expected. And I think that had its drawbacks for him.
Hitch was their property. He belonged to them. He was supposed to do what they wanted. They let him in their house every Sunday night on television, and they wanted another Psycho.
But while fans wanted more of the same, critics seemed to want something different. The attacks of the so-called Hitchcockians had got under the director's skin. He wanted to show them that his brand of pure cinema could include characters of real psychological depth. Unfortunately, he didn't reveal these ambitions to his screenwriter Evan Hunter, who even then was working on what he thought was a screwball comedy with a macabre twist, called The Birds.
Hitch had an agenda that was quite opposite to mine. I wish he'd have told me what it was, because we could have worked it out. But he was going for a sort of respectability that he hadn't had or felt he hadn't had. I mean, there were those among us who felt he was respectable enough, but he felt he hadn't been given the proper respect. He showed the script to V.S. Pritchard, a friend of his who was a short story writer and noted critic in London. And I was suddenly getting suggestions that were not Hitch's suggestions.
While Hunter worked on in the dark, Hitchcock set about tackling what had by now become a major preoccupation: the creation of a female star who looked like Grace Kelly and who did as she was told.
He wanted somebody to own. He wanted a star of his own. No matter who the director is, the care and feeding of stars is hard. That's hard. And I think Hitchcock got an age where he didn't want to do that anymore. He wanted one of his own. Perfectly understandable.
Feel better. Feel younger. Have the figure you want. See the pounds go. With Seago.
Now, from Pet Milk Company, Seago. New different...
I was standing in the secretarial area chatting, and the door opened to Hitch's office, and he came down to where I was standing, and there, framed in the doorway to his office, almost as if it were a deliberate shot, was this tall, glacial blonde. And Hitch walked over to him and he says, "That's Melanie." And I said, "Who is she?" And he told me she had done he saw her in a hair commercial or a shampoo commercial or something. And I said, "Do you think she's going to have the skill to do this stuff?" And he said, "Trust me, Evan."
After Seago, you feel refreshed, exhilarated. Works slick as a whistle.
Feel better.
Feel younger.
I really didn't have any training as an actress. I had been doing commercials. You know, I knew all about the cameras, I knew lighting, I knew all of those kinds of things, but when you're dealing with products, it's quite a different situation than being a character. And Hitch was not only my director, he was my drama coach. You know, I was a very
Location filming for The Birds took place in the tiny town of Bodega Bay, 2 hours north of San Francisco. As ever, pre-planning had been meticulous. But beneath the calm surface, Hitch, the auteur, was in turmoil.
I was pouring myself into the girl. I was doing
entièrement, je me versais dans cette fille.
doing Svengali,
Je
you
faisais
know.
un Svengali avec elle.
But something happened that I'd never done before.
Mais quelque chose s'est passé que je n'ai jamais fait avant.
I began to examine the script as I went along.
Je me suis mise à étudier le script pendant que je
I
travaillais
found deficiencies
et
in
j'ai
it.
trouvé des faiblesses.
I went through the thing in my mind in great detail.
Dans ma tête, je y ai pensé en grand détail,
and put this new ending in.
et j'ai mis cette nouvelle fin.
But this is in the middle of shooting the picture, which I've never done before.
Mais ça, c'était au milieu du tournage, ce qui est une chose que je n'ai jamais fait avant.
And for the first
Pour la première
time,
fois,
my crew around me said,
l'équipe autour de moi a dit
what's wrong with him?
qu'est-ce qui ne va pas avec Hitchcock.
He's getting upset.
Il est tout.
Because to me, I always laugh my way through a picture.
Rigole à travers tout le film.
It was strange, you know.
Pour moi, c'est étrange.
Back at Universal Studios, Hitchcock set to work on the film's complex set pieces, culminating in the terrifying bird attack in the attic. For Tippi Hedren, the terror was all too real.
For 5 days, the 3 prop men had great huge cartons filled with ravens and seagulls and crows, you know, pigeons, and they just kept hurling birds at me for 5 days. And I would just fend them off as they came towards me.
Kept throwing birds at Tippi incessantly, nonstop, you know. Cut, all right, let's go, and change the makeup and tear the dress a little, and the suit she was wearing, tear that a little, and let's go, and more birds. And you could see in the rushes that she really is beginning to look dazed, you know.
Towards the end of it, one of them jumped, and it cut my eye, just below my eye, thank God. And I just, all of a sudden, I had it with that whole thing, and I got all of the birds off of me, and I just sat in the middle of the set and just started to cry from sheer exhaustion. And everybody left the set. They just left me there.
She was in bed 3 days at the end of it.
Elle a été alitée pendant 3 jours à la fin.
Ah oui. Kaput.
Kaput.
Hitchcock had been tinkering with the script of The Birds throughout production, adding dialogue and writing new scenes designed to bring depth to the central characters. He rejected a dramatic finale in favor of a muted ending that was self-consciously European in its lack of resolution. The first test came in March 1963 at New York's Museum of Modern Art, where the film's premiere formed the centerpiece of the first ever Hitchcock retrospective.
At the end of it, there was silence. And then a polite air of applause, and I thought, oh, you were dead.
Later that year, the Birds opened the Cannes Film Festival. The film had baffled most of his fans in America and irritated many of his critics. But thanks to champions like Truffaut, Hitchcock's critical stock was rising. A lot depended on his next film, a psychologically complex tale about a frigid kleptomaniac called Marnie. Once again, Hedren was cast in the leading role, but by now Hitchcock's attachment to his new star had taken on a new intensity.
He was kind of trying to control who I saw, what I, all of those kinds of things. So that became a very, very difficult time for me. I think he became obsessed with this character named Tippi Hedren. He felt that he had created Tippi Hedren.
I think he was having an old man's crise du coeur over Tippi, unquestionably. Hitch was very possessive about the women in his life. He was possessive of his own daughter, and Alma was his. And he even tried to do that with me.
He would not take his eyes off of me. He'd be talking to somebody over here, but he was watching me all the time. And it became very difficult. Mrs. Hitchcock came to me on a number of times and said, I'm so sorry you have to go through this, or that you're going through this. So she, it was apparent to her.
Meanwhile, Evan Hunter, the original screenwriter on Marnie, was having problems of his own. One scene in particular, in which the frigid Marnie is raped on her honeymoon, would ultimately lead to a falling out with the director.
When we were discussing it for the 100th time, and I gave all my reasons, I didn't think a guy who loves her would rape her on their wedding night, and I thought it would be very difficult to rescue him after that scene for the rest of the film. And he said, Evan, and you know how directors do when they're framing a shot? He said, Evan, and he came right in like this. He said, when he sticks it in, I want that camera right on her face. Just like that. And I thought, oh boy, we got trouble here.
When he wanted to do something that was, that might conceivably be defined as shocking, he was like a little boy doing something very naughty, and he wanted to tell you about it. He never, ever told or exposed consciously what this, within the context of what it was, what it meant to him. Not at all. He never knew what a dream was about. Not a clue. He didn't dig into himself. It was all instinctual, and it's what we call talent,
During the filming of everything sort of went fine until probably the last quarter of the shoot. It was a 5-month shoot. And it eventually got to the point where I couldn't stand the control, or the trying to control. And I resented it so highly that I finally told him that I couldn't bear it anymore. Demands were being put onto me that I couldn't acquiesce to. And I said, I need to get out. And he told me that I really couldn't, that I had my parents to worry about, my daughter. I said, it doesn't matter, I can't live this way. And he literally said, I'll ruin your career.
She got very annoyed with him. And so Hitch said to me, he said, she said something that no one is permitted to say to me. And I said, what did she say? What did she say? And he said, she referred to my weight. And apparently what she actually said was, you know, you fat pig, who the hell do you think you are to tell me that I can or can't do this and that? So after that, they never spoke directly to each other again throughout the shooting. It was, would you tell Mr. Hitchcock? Would you ask Miss Hedren? And that was the basis of the bust-up.
He kept me under contract. He paid me my little salary every week for a couple of years. And by that time, all of the people who did want to use me in films, because after Marnie, I was hot, and was just told I wasn't available. There was never a question of us working together again. It was just a very definite cutoff. And it was by me. I am totally responsible for it. No, I'm not. He is.
Marnie bombed at the box office. His next film, Torn Curtain, his 50th feature, fared even worse. With 3 flops in a row, Alfred Hitchcock was beginning to look dated. His response was characteristically bold. In 1967, he attempted to reinvent himself once more with a project known by its working title, Kaleidoscope Frenzy. Hitchcock wrote the sexually explicit, often brutal script himself and planned to shoot it on location in New York with a cast of unknowns. To sell the concept to Universal, he commissioned an elaborate series of test shots and stills which capture the ambition of his intentions.
We went to about 15 locations around the city of New York. We went upstate New York, and we went to the Maritime Harbor where all the Liberty ships are berthed. We did all places where there was a great body of water. Turns out that water figured very heavily into the story. And every time this young boy saw water and stuff, he got turned and he had to commit a murder. And unfortunately, his mother, in the film, discovered it was him, and she turned him in. This was a film that he was strongly believed in and really wanted to do.
Kaleidoscope Frenzy is not a light film. It begins in the first 20 minutes with one of the most brutal murders that's ever been imagined for an American screen. Lew Wasserman felt that Kaleidoscope Frenzy would do irreparable harm to the Hitchcock franchise. That Hitchcock, the director, and the marketable entity would basically come to an end if he made this film. This is despite the fact that Hitchcock went to great lengths to convince both Lew Wasserman and the board of MCA to do the film. They basically told him no. And for Hitchcock, he had not been told no probably for nearly 20 years. Probably the last no he heard was in 1946 or something from David O. Selznick. So to be told no at a studio where he was one of the preeminent directors it must have been a difficult, almost shattering experience.
Kaleidoscope Frenzy was the last reflex of a director who for 40 years had delighted in keeping one step ahead of his audiences. Of the films that marked the end of his career, only Frenzy, shot in Britain in 1972, showed any of the old magic.
Slowly, slowly, hands slowly, let the hands drop, eyes begin to stare, let the eyes stare, open, open, open.
By now, both Hitchcock and Alma were in poor health. Alma had the first of 2 strokes during the making of Frenzy. Hitchcock himself had been fitted with a pacemaker and was drinking heavily to deaden the pain of chronic arthritis.
His arthritis in his knees was painful. I still have the vision of him in mind, of us walking along the hallway of the bungalow that he occupied, holding on to the wall to come down to the little office I had at the end there. But it was just an unstated agreement that we were just going to keep Hitch going as long as he wanted to go.
There was a woman down there in a blue hat who was paying no attention to anything.
In 1978, Hitchcock was working on The Short Night, his 56th feature. On one occasion, he asked screenwriter David Freeman to come to his house in Bel Air for a story session.
Alma had been ill during that period, and she was feeling better. And so he invited her to come into the story session. When Hitchcock saw her sitting there in their house and listening, engaged in this discussion, I could just feel the years coming off his shoulders. He never walked around during a story meeting. That's not something he did. He would sit like a Buddha, usually, and just make his decrees. But with Alma there, in their house, he got up and kind of walked around, or walked in his fashion, and I think he was showing off for her. I think it was, he was showing her that he could still do it, that she could participate, that this was possible. He was saying to his wife, look, we can make another one. This can happen. It's worth living. I don't think it was anything less than that.
One day I was up in my office and I got a call, his secretary, stating that, would you come down here right away? Mr. Hitchcock wants. He was behind his desk and he was very maudlin. And what's wrong? He says, I want you to do me a favor. I said, well, of course, what do you want me to do? And he says, I want you to call Mr. Wasserman and tell him that I'm all through, that I'm never going to make another movie. It was very sad. Something that I'll never forget.
Production on The Short Night was halted in May 1979. Within days, Hitchcock's office was closed. The following year, at the age of 80, and with a belated knighthood to add to countless other honours, Sir Alfred Hitchcock died. Alma, his toughest critic and fiercest defender, died 2 years later.
Could make only one more picture. Perish the thought, but if you could only make one more picture, what would it be about?
I think it would be about murder, mayhem, violence, sex, beautifully pictorially expressed, lovely costumes, perfect cutting, and a joke or two.
Hitchcock's North by Northwest is next on BBC Two. Cary Grant, That Aeroplane, and Eva Marie Saint dangling from Mount Rushmore.